Hello everyone. Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel. And let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is right now. Cruise ships are meant to be relaxing escapes. Endless ocean views, warm sun, and nights filled with music. But when the decks are quiet and the sea is black, strange things can happen far from shore. I remember that cruise like it was yesterday. Even though it was back in 2014, I was working as an embarkation officer for a major cruise line out of Barcelona. Handling the chaos of passengers boarding, checking manifests, scanning passports, and making sure everything was squared away before we set sail on our Mediterranean itinerary. It was a 7-night voyage hitting ports in Italy, France, and back to Spain. Busy job, but I liked the routine. Greet folks with a smile, tick off names on the digital manifest, and wave them aboard to start their vacation. The ship was one of those massive ones, over 3,000 passengers, multiple decks, pools, theaters, the works. Our manifest was ironclad. Every booking came with names, cabin assignments, passport copies uploaded in advance, and we cross-referenced everything with port authorities. No one got on without being cleared. That first day in Barcelona was the usual whirlwind. Families lugging suitcases, couples excited for romance at sea, solo travelers with their guidebooks. I checked in hundreds, including this one couple, a middle-aged woman named Elena Ramirez and her husband Marco. They seemed ordinary, her with a sun hat and him carrying their carry-ons. I scanned their passports, stamped the manifest, and sent them up to their balcony cabin on deck 8. Nothing out of the ordinary. We shoved off that afternoon, and the first day at sea was smooth. Passengers settling in, enjoying the buffets and shows. My shifts rotated, but on the second night, I was pulling a late one at the front desk, handling lost key cards, excursion bookings, that sort of thing. Around midnight, Elena came down, looking worried but not panicked yet. She was in her robe, hair a bit messy, like she'd been pacing. "Have you seen my husband?" she asked. Marco went to get some ice from the buffet around 11 p.m., and he hasn't come back. I thought maybe he stopped at a bar or something. I nodded, kept it professional. Missing passengers aren't unheard of. People get turned around on these floating cities or decide to wander. I radioed security right away, gave them Marco's description from the manifest. Mid-50s, salt and pepper hair, wearing a blue polo shirt. They started a standard sweep, checked the bars, lounges, pools, even the casino and gym. Nothing. Then they hit the decks. Every promenade, sun lounge, and railing. Still zilch. By 1 a.m., they'd escalated. Searched crew areas, the engine room, laundry facilities. The captain was briefed, but we didn't sound any alarms yet. Didn't want to spook the other guests. Elena was getting more upset by then, so I sat her down with some tea and pulled up the security footage on my terminal. Our ship had cameras everywhere, halls, decks, elevators. We rewound to 11:05 p.m. There was Marco, clear as day, leaving their cabin with an ice bucket, walking down the corridor toward the aft buffet. He turned a corner onto the rear deck, and that was it. No footage of him reaching the buffet. No sign of him doubling back inside. No glimpse of him at the railings where someone might go overboard. It was like he hit an invisible wall and vanished. Security double-checked for blind spots, maybe a glitch, but the system was solid. No man overboard alerts from the sensors either. we were stumped. By morning, the purser, our head of passenger services, got involved. He was a no-nonsense guy named Javier, been at sea for 20 years. We pulled the full manifest again, cross-referencing with booking records and port data. Elena's name was there. Solo booking, actually. Wait, no, that couldn't be right. I remember checking them both in. But as Javier dug deeper, the discrepancies piled up. The cabin was booked under her name only. No record of a Marco Ramirez in the system. No ticket purchase. No passport scan logged in our database. We even called the Barcelona Port Authority. They confirmed processing only Elena's passport. No entry for a husband. That hit me like a wave. I pulled up the embarkation footage myself. There he was, Marco, standing right next to her at my desk, handing over his passport. I could see myself scanning it, but the digital logs? Blank for him. Javier muttered something about a system error, maybe a glitch in the upload from the booking agency. Elena was in tears by now, insisting they'd booked together months ago, showing us photos on her phone of them as a couple. Security kept searching, but the ship was only so big. We docked in our first port, Civitavecchia, near Rome, that afternoon. And local authorities came aboard. Italian police, Interpol reps, even a rep from the Spanish consulate since they were from Madrid. The investigation ramped up fast. They interviewed Elena extensively. Turns out, she and Marco had been having marital issues. Financial troubles, arguments about money. The police pulled their records. Marco's passport was real, but it hadn't been stamped at Barcelona because, get this, he wasn't supposed to be there. Digging into the booking history, it looked like Elena had originally booked solo, then maybe tried to add him last minute without proper documentation. But the video showed him boarding. How? Turns out, in the embarkation rush, I must have scanned her passport twice by mistake, assuming the second was his. Human error on my end, compounded by a manifest sync issue where his add-on never fully processed due to a payment glitch. Their credit card had been declined for the upgrade, but it slipped through the cracks. As for the disappearance, the police pieced it together from more footage and witness statements. Marco hadn't vanished. He ducked into a service stairwell off-camera on the rear deck, avoiding the main paths. A crew member later admitted seeing a man matching his description in the crew quarters early that morning, looking disoriented. Turns out, Marco had staged it all. He'd been planning to leave Elena, using the cruise as cover. He hid out in a storage area until we docked in Civitavecchia, then slipped off the ship during the passenger disembarkation chaos, blending into the crowds at the port. Italian authorities tracked him via CCTV at the train station. He'd caught a ride to Rome and flown out under his own name to somewhere in South America, where he had family. Elena was devastated, but the police confirmed it was a domestic issue, not foul play. No charges for her, but Marco faced some fraud inquiries for the unpaid booking. The cruise line comped her the rest of the trip, upgraded her excursions, and she finished the voyage solo, though quieter than before. As for me, I got a stern talking to about double-checking scans, and we implemented better manifest verification protocols after that. By the time we looped back to Barcelona, the case was closed. Police reports filed, insurance notified for the minor booking mess, and everyone moved on. I finished my shift that final day, handed off to the next crew, and headed home for some well-earned leave. Cruises are full of stories, but that one taught me. Even at sea, most mysteries boil down to paperwork and people being people. In the summer of 2005, George Allen Smith IV, a 26-year-old store manager from Greenwich, Connecticut, embarked on what should have been the trip of a lifetime. Born on October 3, 1978, George was known among his family and friends as a kind, outgoing young man with a bright future. He had recently graduated from college and was working in the family business, managing a liquor store. On June 25, 2005, he married his fiancée, Jennifer Hagel, a 25-year-old fitness trainer from Cromwell, Connecticut, in a picturesque ceremony in Newport, Rhode Island. The couple, deeply in love and excited for their new life together, set off just 4 days later on a luxurious 12-day honeymoon cruise aboard Royal Caribbean's Brilliance of the Seas. Departing from Barcelona on June 29th, the itinerary promised romantic stops along the Mediterranean, including the French Riviera, Florence in Italy, Mykonos in Greece, and Kusadasi in Turkey. The Brilliance of the Seas was a gleaming 90,000-ton vessel capable of carrying over 2,000 passengers, with amenities like casinos, bars, pools, and fine dining. For the first few days, George and Jennifer enjoyed the cruise immensely, sightseeing during port calls, lounging by the pool, and indulging in the ship's vibrant nightlife. George, described as sociable and fun-loving, made friends easily. During a stop in Florence, he purchased a bottle of absinthe, which he smuggled aboard, adding to the festive atmosphere. Jennifer, athletic and outgoing, matched his energy, and the couple seemed to be living their dream. But on the night of July 4th, 2005, as the ship sailed between Kusadasi, Turkey, and its next port in Piraeus, Greece, things took a darker turn. The evening began, innocently enough, with celebrations for Independence Day. George and Jennifer dined, drank, and headed to the ship's casino, where they gambled and socialized. They met a group of young men. Josh Askin, a 20-year-old from California whom George knew vaguely from high school, and 3 Russian-American passengers, Greg Rosenberg, also known as Greg Lawyer in some reports, his cousin Zachary Rosenberg, and Rusty Kaufman. The group bonded over drinks and games, with the absinthe flowing freely. Witnesses later described the night as rowdy, with heavy alcohol consumption all around. As the hours ticked past midnight, tensions subtly emerged. Jennifer, reportedly intoxicated, kicked a slot machine in frustration after losing money, leading casino staff to escort her out. Accounts vary here. Some say she argued with George before leaving, while others claim she was simply too drunk to continue. Around 3:30 a.m., crew members found her asleep in a hallway far from their cabin and helped her back to stateroom 9062 on Deck 9. George, however, stayed behind with Askin, the Rosenbergs, and Kaufman, continuing the party. What happened next remains shrouded in conflicting testimonies. The group allegedly moved to George and Jennifer's cabin, where more drinking ensued. Neighbors in adjacent cabins reported hearing loud noises around 4 a.m., arguing voices, thumping sounds like furniture being moved, and what sounded like a heated confrontation. One passenger described it as a party that got out of hand, followed by an eerie silence. Then, 3 men were heard leaving the cabin, laughing and chatting casually. No one saw George after that. The next morning, July 5th, dawned with alarm. Jennifer woke up alone in the cabin, assuming George had gone for breakfast or a walk. But when he didn't return, she grew worried. Meanwhile, a passenger on a lower deck noticed something horrific. dark red streaks of blood smeared across the metal awning below the Smiths' balcony. Crew members were alerted, and upon entering the cabin they found more blood on the bed sheets, the floor, and even the balcony railing. It appeared as though someone had gone over the side, leaving a grisly trail. The ship's captain quickly notified Turkish authorities, as the vessel was in Turkish waters, and the Brilliance of the Seas docked in Kusadasi for an emergency investigation. Turkish police boarded the ship and conducted initial forensics. They photographed the blood evidence and interviewed passengers, but the scene was compromised. Crew had already begun cleaning the cabin before authorities arrived, a move later criticized as negligent. The FBI was soon involved, given George's American citizenship, and agents flew in to assist. Security footage from the ship showed George with the group earlier in the evening, but offered no clear view of the balcony incident. The four men, Askin, the Rosenbergs, and Kaufman, were questioned, but their stories shifted. Initially, they claimed George was drunk and alone when they left. Later, details about arguments and possible roughhousing emerged. One theory suggested a robbery motive, as George's watch and other valuables were missing, and there were rumors of a safe in the cabin being tampered with. Jennifer, distraught and in shock, cooperated with investigators but faced scrutiny. She had no memory of the night's end due to her intoxication, and some reports noted she continued sunbathing and getting a massage later that day, which her family attributed to denial and grief. George's family, his parents, George III and Maureen, and sister Bree, flew to Turkey immediately, convinced of foul play. They pointed to the blood evidence, the noises, and the men's inconsistent accounts as proof of murder. This wasn't an accident, George's father later said in interviews. Someone knows what happened. Theories proliferated in the media frenzy that followed. Dateline NBC, 48 Hours, and even a Lifetime movie titled *Deadly Honeymoon*, dramatized the case. Some speculated George, heavily intoxicated. His blood alcohol level was estimated high based on witness accounts. Accidentally fell while trying to sit on the railing. Others believed the men robbed him. A scuffle ensued, and they threw him overboard to cover it up. The Russian-American men's backgrounds raised eyebrows. Greg Rosenberg had a criminal record, and in 2020, he was killed in a targeted shooting in Florida, reigniting speculation about organized crime ties. By 2012, the FBI had referred the case to its Mafia division, exploring links to a robbery gone bad. Legal battles ensued. In June 2006, Royal Caribbean settled with Jennifer for $1.1 million, but George's family contested it, arguing she had accepted without their input. They sued the cruise line for negligence, citing poor security and the hasty cleanup. In 2010, an amended settlement provided additional compensation to the family, though details remained confidential. The case also spurred legislative change. George's disappearance highlighted safety gaps on cruises, leading to the Cruise Vessel Security and Safety Act of 2010, which mandated better reporting of crimes at sea and improved ship security. Despite exhaustive efforts, searches of the sea, polygraphs for witnesses, and international cooperation, the investigation yielded no arrests. George's body was never recovered, and on January 7, 2015, the FBI officially closed the probe, citing insufficient evidence to pursue charges. "We've followed every lead," an agent stated at the time, "but without new information, we can't proceed." The family, while devastated, accepted the closure as a painful necessity, channeling their energy into advocacy for cruise safety. Jennifer remarried in 2009, starting a new family with 2 children, and has maintained it was a tragic accident. 2 decades later, as of 2025, the case remains a cautionary tale, but the files are sealed. The witnesses have moved on, and the sea has kept its secrets. The shift ended, the project wrapped, and though unanswered questions linger in private hearts, the official record marks it closed, a somber end to a honeymoon that began with such promise. Rebecca Coriam was a vibrant 24-year-old from Chester, England, known for her energetic personality, love of sports, and dedication to youth work. Born on March 11, 1987, she grew up in a close-knit family with her parents, Mike and Anne Maria, her sister Rachel, and 2 foster brothers. Rebecca attended Chester Catholic High School and later studied sports science at Plymouth University, where she also volunteered with the British Army Cadets, teaching outdoor activities to children. Her passion for working with kids led her to a 4-month stint at Camp America in Maine, USA, before she pursued a degree in youth studies at Liverpool Hope University. In June 2010, after a successful interview in London, she joined Disney Cruise Line as a youth counselor, undergoing training at Disney's Florida theme parks. She began her role on the Disney Wonder, a massive ship that could hold over 2,700 passengers and 1,000 crew members, sailing routes from the Bahamas to the Mexican Riviera. Rebecca thrived in the job, forming close friendships with colleagues and maintaining regular contact with her family back home. She even planned to buy them tickets for a Disneyland Paris trip, reflecting her thoughtful nature. In early 2011, after a brief return to England following her grandfather's death, Rebecca rejoined the Disney Wonder in Los Angeles for a 7-day cruise along the Pacific coast of Mexico, with stops in Puerto Vallarta and Cabo San Lucas. The ship departed on March 20, 2011, filled with families enjoying Disney's signature entertainment, character meet and greets, themed dining, and onboard activities. Rebecca, assigned to youth programs, was last in touch with her parents via Facebook on March 21st, promising to call them the next day. That evening, the ship was sailing smoothly in calm seas, with no reports of rough weather or unusual incidents. Around 5:45 a.m. on March 22nd, 2011, security cameras captured Rebecca in the crew lounge on Deck 1 near the front of the ship. Dressed in baggy men's clothing, a detail later noted by private investigators, she appeared visibly distressed, pacing while speaking on an internal phone. She gestured animatedly, at one point pushing her hair back in frustration, and responded to a concerned male colleague who approached her by saying, "Yeah, fine," before hanging up and walking away, tugging at her clothes uncomfortably. This footage would become the last confirmed sighting of her. When Rebecca failed to report for her 9 a.m. shift overseeing children's activities, her colleagues grew worried. A thorough page over the ship's PA system went unanswered, and a search of her cabin revealed nothing amiss. Her belongings, including her passport, were still there. The crew immediately initiated a full ship-wide search, combing every deck, storage area, and public space. No sign of Rebecca emerged. As the Disney Wonder continued its voyage, the captain notified the U.S. Coast Guard and Mexican Navy, who deployed aircraft and vessels to scan the surrounding ocean for any trace of her in the international waters the ship had traversed. Despite extensive efforts covering hundreds of square miles, no body or evidence was recovered. The ship docked back in Los Angeles on March 25, 2011, where Rebecca's devastated parents, flown in by Disney, boarded to meet with executives and the captain. Because the Disney Wonder was registered in the Bahamas, a common practice for cruise lines to benefit from lax regulations, the investigation fell under the jurisdiction of the Royal Bahamas Police Force, RBPF. A single detective, Superintendent Paul Roll, flew to Los Angeles and spent what the family described as just one day aboard, interviewing a limited number of crew members and no passengers. He focused on the CCTV footage in the area around the crew pool on Deck 5, where a pair of flip-flops was found near the railing. Disney officials proposed that Rebecca had been swept overboard by a rogue wave while near the pool, despite reports of calm seas that night and the pool's high 1.5-meter, 5-foot walls designed to prevent such accidents. The family questioned this, noting the flip-flops didn't match Rebecca's size or style. One even had another crew member's name and cabin number on it, and highlighted that the sea conditions didn't support a rogue wave theory. In the months following, journalist John Ronson, with the Aquarium's permission, boarded the Disney Wonder for the same Mexican Riviera route to investigate undercover. Posing as a passenger, he spoke discreetly with crew members who revealed a culture of silence enforced by the company to protect its family-friendly image. Some whispered that Rebecca might have been involved in a complicated romantic situation, a love triangle involving her girlfriend, Tracy Medley, a fellow crew member, and a male colleague, which could have contributed to her distress during the phone call. The call, reportedly recorded as per-ship protocol, was said to involve an emotional conversation with a mutual friend about relationship troubles. Crew suggested she might have gone to the Deck 5 crew pool area to clear her head, perhaps sitting on the wall in a moment of vulnerability, and accidentally fallen due to slippery conditions or wind. Others speculated suicide, though her family adamantly rejected this, citing her upbeat demeanor and future plans. Ronson also learned of broader issues in the cruise industry, including high rates of unreported sexual assaults and disappearances, 171 cases in the prior decade, often mishandled due to jurisdictional loopholes. The Aquariums, unconvinced by the official narrative, hired private investigators and pushed for more transparency. In 2015, one investigator analyzed the CCTV footage and confirmed the love triangle theory, suggesting possible foul play or an altercation. Reports emerged of crew hints that Rebecca might have been sexually assaulted before going overboard, though no concrete evidence supported this. The family sued Disney in 2014, alleging negligence in the investigation and safety measures, seeking answers rather than just compensation. After years of legal battles, Disney settled with the Aquariums in April 2016 for an undisclosed amount, without admitting liability. The settlement included a confidentiality agreement, effectively closing the civil aspect of the case. The Bahamian police investigation, completed after 9 months, officially concluded there was no evidence of foul play, attributing the disappearance to an accidental fall overboard. While the case technically remains open for any new leads, no further developments have surfaced in the intervening years, and authorities have treated it as resolved in practice. The Aquariums, though still grieving, channeled their energy into advocacy, supporting the International Cruise Victims Organization and pushing for better regulations on cruise ships, including U.S. jurisdiction for incidents involving American ports. With the legal proceedings wrapped up and the official probe deeming it an unfortunate accident, the matter drew to a close, allowing the family to focus on remembering Rebecca's joyful life rather than endless speculation. I remember that voyage like it was yesterday, even though it's been over 2 decades now. I was the second engineer on that old cargo cruise hybrid out of Singapore back in 2002. We called her the Sea Wanderer, though the official logs kept her unnamed for whatever bureaucratic reasons the company had. She was a quirky ship, part freighter hauling containers of spices and electronics across Southeast Asia, part budget cruiser for tourists chasing cheap island hops. Not the fanciest gig, but it paid the bills, and the routes through the Strait of Malacca were always a mix of calm seas and sudden squalls. The cadet's name was Ravi Singh, fresh out of Maritime Academy in Mumbai, barely 22 years old. He was assigned to us for his mandatory sea time, eager as they come, always volunteering for the grimy jobs down in the engine room. That space was a beast, hot, humid, crammed with pipes, pumps, and the constant rumble of the diesels. The section where it happened was this isolated bilge area, tucked behind the main machinery spaces, no direct access to open water. It was basically a low sump for collecting condensation and minor leaks, usually just a few inches of oily water sloshing around. Nothing deep enough to drown in, unless you were trying to. Ravi started acting off about a week into the leg from Jakarta to Bangkok. We'd been at sea for days, dodging monsoons, and the engine room was stuffier than usual with the AC on the fritz. He mentioned it casually at first during mess hall chats. Said he kept hearing faint voices murmuring behind the bulkhead walls down there. Like someone's whispering secrets, he'd say with a half laugh, trying to play it cool. We all brushed it off. Engine rooms are noisy places, full of echoes from vents and vibrations. Could have been the hum of the props or steam hissing from a valve. But then he got weirder about it. I'd catch him during shifts, staring at the walls, tilting his head like he was listening. Once, I walked in on him mid-conversation, talking low and urgent to empty air. "What do you want? Why me?" No one there, of course. Just shadows from the overhead lights. The crew started whispering. Superstitions run deep on ships, old tales of jinn in the waters or ghosts from wrecked vessels. A few of the Indonesian deckhands swore Ravi had pissed off some spirit by not respecting the sea rituals, like pouring out rice wine before shifts. Me, I figured it was stress. Cadets crack sometimes. Long hours, isolation, the constant motion. I pulled him aside one evening, told him to get some rest, maybe talk to the medic about seasickness meds or something stronger. He nodded, but his eyes were bloodshot, distant. Said the voices were getting clearer, telling him things about the ship. Secrets from past voyages, like a fire in the 80s that the company covered up. Then came the night it happened. It was around 0200, graveyard shift. Ravi was down in that bilge section alone, checking for leaks as part of routine maintenance. I was up in the control room monitoring gauges when the alarm pinged. A motion sensor tripped, but no flood warnings. Sent a junior oiler down to check, and he came back white as a sheet, yelling for help. We found Ravi face down in that shallow water, not moving. Maybe 4 inches deep, tops, enough to wet your boots, not drown a grown man. No signs of a fall, no head trauma, just still. We pulled him out, tried CPR, but he was gone. Autopsy later said asphyxiation by drowning, but how? The medic speculated he'd passed out, maybe from fumes or exhaustion, and inhaled the water while unconscious. The official report from the company called it an accidental fall during routine duties. They wrapped it quick. Paperwork filed in port, body flown home to his family in India. But the crew wasn't buying it. Whispers turned to outright talk. Ravi's ghost haunting the engine room. A couple of guys refused night shifts down there, swearing they heard wet footsteps sloshing behind them in the dark, like someone dripping and following. One night, I even thought I heard it myself. Squish, squish, echoing off the metal. Gave me chills, but I chalked it up to nerves and the ship's creaks. Things escalated when we hit Bangkok. Half the engineering team threatened to jump ship if we didn't do something. The captain, a no-nonsense Dutch guy named Van der Meer, called in a local investigator, some ex-Navy type who specialized in maritime incidents. He spent 2 days poking around, tested air quality, checked for gas leaks, even brought in a psychologist to talk to us about group hysteria. Turns out there was a slow carbon monoxide buildup from a faulty exhaust vent in that bilge area. Nothing lethal on its own, but enough to cause hallucinations, dizziness, especially if you'd been down there for hours. Ravi's voices were likely auditory hallucinations from CO poisoning. The shallow water? He'd probably fainted, fallen face first, and drowned in it because no one was around to flip him over. As for the footsteps, the investigator found a minor leak in a condensate line. Dripping rhythmically into the bilge, sounded just like wet boots when the ship rolled. We fixed the vent and the leak right there in port, patched the seals, rerouted the exhaust, ran full air tests. The psychologist held a session for the crew, explaining how stress and suggestion can amplify things, turn drips into ghosts. By the time we shoved off for the next leg, the whispers had died down. No more refusals for shifts, no more hauntings. The engine room went back to being just hot and noisy, nothing more. Ravi's death was a tragedy, no doubt. Poor kid, wrong place, wrong time. But it got resolved. Investigation closed, repairs done, crew moved on. We all raised a glass to him in the mess hall one night, then got back to work. Ships don't stop for ghosts, real or imagined. Life at sea rolls on, shift after shift, until the voyage ends. Back in 2008, I was working as a cabin steward on a major cruise line, assigned to deck 8 of a massive ship sailing a 7-day loop through the Caribbean. It was one of those routes that hit all the highlights: St. Martin, San Juan, a private island stop, full of families, honeymooners, and retirees looking to unwind. My job was straightforward: clean cabins, restock amenities, turn down beds in the evenings, and handle any guest requests that came my way. I'd been doing it for about 3 years by then, so I'd seen my share of oddball situations. Drunk passengers locking themselves out, lost luggage, even the occasional medical emergency. But nothing quite like what happened with cabin 827. The cruise kicked off from Miami on a sunny Saturday afternoon. Deck 8 was mostly interior and ocean view cabins, nothing too fancy, but comfortable enough for the mid-range crowd. I had about 20 cabins to manage, and I prided myself on keeping things efficient. On the first day, everything was routine. Guests settling in, unpacking, heading out for the welcome show or the pool deck. Cabin 827 was booked for a solo traveler, a middle-aged guy named Mr. Harlan, according to the manifest. He was quiet when I did my initial check-in knock, just a mumbled, "All good, thanks," through the door. No big deal, some people prefer privacy on these trips. By the second day, as we were steaming toward our first port, I noticed the "Do Not Disturb" sign hanging on the door handle of 827. It was flipped from the inside, the way guests do when they want to sleep in or just be left alone. Again, not unusual. Cruises are all about relaxation. And with the rocking of the ship and the jet lag from travel, folks often crash hard. I skipped it and moved on, focusing on the other cabins where people were out exploring or at breakfast buffets. Day 3 came and went much the same. We docked in St. Martin, and most passengers disembarked for beach excursions or shopping. I used the downtime to deep clean empties, but 827 still had that sign up. A couple of room service trays had appeared outside the door overnight. Empty plates from burgers and salads, nothing fancy. I cleared them away as part of my rounds, figuring Mr. Harlan was just holing up, maybe seasick or dealing with some personal stuff. Cruises can be overwhelming for introverts. It was on day 4, midway through the voyage as we headed towards San Juan, that things started feeling off. The sign was still there, and now there were 3 more trays piled up. Breakfast remnants, a half-eaten pizza, some desserts. The hallway was starting to smell a bit, that mix of stale food and ocean air. I knocked lightly during my morning sweep, calling out, "Housekeeping? Just checking if you need anything freshened up?" No response. I noted it in my log and decided to flag it for my supervisor, Maria. She was a no-nonsense veteran from the Philippines who'd been on ships longer than I'd been alive. Maria came by around noon, during a lull between port calls. She knocked more firmly, announcing herself. Still nothing. We both stood there for a minute, listening. The hum of the AC vents, distant laughter from the atrium below, but no sounds from inside. "Probably just a heavy sleeper or out on deck without flipping the sign," she said, but I could tell she was a tad concerned. Protocol was clear. If there's potential for a welfare check, involve security. So we radioed them up. 2 security officers arrived within 10 minutes. One a burly guy named Carlos, the other a younger woman, Lena. They used the master keycard to pop the door, with Maria and me hanging back in the hall. The door swung open, and we all peered in. The cabin was spotless, like it hadn't been touched since embarkation. Bed perfectly made with the cruise line's signature fold on the comforter, towels untouched in the bathroom, no toiletries scattered around. No luggage in sight, no clothes in the closet or drawers, just empty hangers swaying slightly with the ship's motion. But there, right by the foot of the bed, was a single pair of men's dress shoes, polished black leather, size 10 or so, neatly aligned like someone had just stepped out of them. On the small desk by the porthole window, there was an open journal. A plain black notebook, the kind you buy at any drugstore. It was flipped to what looked like the last entry, and the handwriting was shaky, almost frantic. "The water is louder every night. I think it's coming for me." That line sent a chill down my spine, I'll admit. The ocean was calm that day, but out at sea, the waves can play tricks on your mind, especially if you're not used to it. Security did a quick sweep. No one under the bed, in the closet, or bathroom. They photographed everything, noted the journal, and bagged the shoes as potential evidence. Maria instructed me to hold off on cleaning until they cleared it. We locked the door back up, no sign on it this time, and reported it to the bridge. Turns out, Mr. Harlan had been seen on CCTV disembarking in St. Martin the day before, but he hadn't scanned back on board. That triggered a full passenger accounting. Announcements over the PA, checks at all muster stations. By evening, as we pulled into San Juan, the captain confirmed it. Harlan had apparently ditched the cruise voluntarily, maybe met someone ashore or just decided to fly home early. It happens more often than you'd think. personal emergencies, arguments with travel companions, or just buyer's remorse on the vacation. The journal? Security figured it was dramatic flair. Maybe he was a writer working on a story or dealing with anxiety about the sea. The water bit could have been metaphorical for stress or something psychological. As for the trays, he'd probably ordered extras before leaving, or room service had misdelivered a couple. The shoes were left behind in his haste, and the cabin's immaculate state suggested he'd packed up quickly and quietly. But here's the part that threw us for a loop initially. The next morning, day 5, I swung by 827 during my rounds, and there was the "Do Not Disturb" sign back on the door, from the inside, or so it seemed. My heart skipped a beat, but I radioed Mariah right away. She came down, and we had security open it again. Inside? Still empty, but we noticed something we'd missed before. A small maintenance panel in the wall, slightly ajar. Turns out it connected to an adjacent crew access corridor. A fellow steward, new to the team, had been using it as a shortcut during his night shift and must have accidentally flipped the sign while fiddling around, maybe stashing supplies or just being careless. He fessed up when questioned, embarrassed as hell. No ghost, no mystery, just human error on a busy ship. Security wrapped up their report. The cabin was reassigned to a walk-up guest from the wait list, and that was that. The rest of the cruise went smoothly. Sunny ports, themed dinners, the usual. By day 7, back in Miami, we offloaded passengers, did our final deep cleanse, and clocked out. I collected my tips, said goodbye to the crew, and headed home for a week's break before the next sailing. Looking back, it was a weird blip in an otherwise routine gig, but it taught me to double-check the details. Cruises are floating cities. Lots of moving parts, lots of ways for things to seem spooky when they're just everyday mix-ups. It was the summer of 1999, and my wife Sarah and I had finally saved up enough for that dream vacation we'd been talking about for years. A 7-day Alaskan cruise aboard the MS Nordam, part of the Uncanny America line. We were in our mid-30s back then, both working desk jobs in Seattle. She as a school teacher, me as an accountant, and we needed a break from the grind. Alaska seemed perfect. Glaciers, wildlife, fresh air, and no cell phones to interrupt. Not that they were as ubiquitous back then anyway. We boarded in Vancouver, excited like kids on Christmas morning, and spent the first couple of days soaking it all in. We watched humpback whales breaching off the starboard side, hiked a short trail during a stop in Juneau, and indulged in way too much seafood at the buffet. Our cabin was modest, inside stateroom on deck 4. But we'd splurged a bit for one with a small porthole window. It wasn't much, just a round pane about 18 inches across, offering a glimpse of the endless Pacific Ocean. We joked that it made us feel like we were on a real adventure, not just floating in a hotel. By the 3rd night, we were well into the inside passage, heading toward Glacier Bay. The seas had been calm so far, but that evening, a light fog rolled in, and the ship rocked a bit more than usual. Sarah and I had turned in early after a long day of excursions. Around 10 p.m., I remember falling asleep to the gentle hum of the engines and the faint lapping of waves against the hull. But around 2 a.m., something pulled me out of that deep sleep, a knocking sound. It started soft, like someone tapping politely on a door. But then it grew more insistent, rhythmic almost. Knock, knock, knock. Pause. Knock, knock, knock. At first, I thought it was coming from the hallway, maybe a late-night wanderer or room service mix-up. Groggy, I sat up in the narrow bed, rubbing my eyes, and listened. No, it wasn't from the door. It seemed to be coming from the porthole. The cabin was pitch black, except for a sliver of moonlight filtering through the curtain over the window. I swung my legs over the side of the bed, my heart picking up a little. Not scared yet, just annoyed and curious. Sarah was still sound asleep beside me, her breathing steady. I figured it might be a loose rope from the lifeboats above us slapping against the hull in the wind, or maybe some debris in the water. The ship wasn't moving fast, but things happen at sea. I shuffled over to the porthole, careful not to stub my toe on the tiny desk, and pulled back the heavy curtain. What I saw froze me in place. Pressed right up against the glass was a man's face, pale as a ghost, with skin that looked bloated and pruned, like it had been submerged in water for too long. His eyes were wide open, bulging almost, staring straight at me with this desperate, unblinking gaze. His hair was matted and dark, floating slightly as if he were underwater, and his mouth was moving, forming words I couldn't make out, lips pressing against the cold glass. Over the rush of the ocean outside and the distant thrum of the ship, I couldn't hear a thing he might have been saying. It was like watching a silent horror movie, but real, right there, inches from my own face. I yelped, more like a strangled gasp, and stumbled backward, tripping over my slippers and landing hard on the edge of the bed. My pulse was hammering in my ears, and a cold sweat broke out across my back. "Sarah! Sarah, wake up!" I shook her shoulder, my voice hoarse. She bolted upright, disoriented, mumbling. "What? What's wrong?" I pointed at the porthole, babbling something about a face, a man outside. She flicked on the bedside lamp, flooding the room with harsh yellow light, and we both crept back to the window. I yanked the curtain aside again, half expecting the face to lunge at us. Nothing. Just the dark ocean, waves churning faintly in the moonlight, and the foggy horizon. No man, no knocking, no sign of anything amiss. Sarah looked at me like I'd lost my mind. "Are you sure it wasn't a dream? Or maybe your reflection?" she asked, rubbing her arms against the chill. I insisted it wasn't. I'd seen details, the way his mouth moved, the waterlogged skin. But doubt crept in even as I said it. We checked the porthole latch. It was secure. No way anyone could have been out there. We didn't sleep much the rest of the night, lying there whispering theories. Maybe a trick of the light from the ship's exterior lamps, or fatigue from the travel playing with my mind. By morning, the whole thing felt surreal, like a half-remembered nightmare. We decided to mention it to our cabin steward during breakfast cleanup. His name was Ramon, a friendly guy from the Philippines who'd been chatty about his family back home. When I described what I'd seen, his smile faded, and he shifted uncomfortably, glancing at the porthole. "Sir," he said slowly, "we're on deck 4. That window is about 30 feet above the waterline. No one could be out there without scaffolding or ropes, and we don't do exterior work at night, especially not in these waters." He paused, then added, "Sometimes guests see things. Reflections from the waves, or maybe shadows from the upper decks. The ocean can play tricks, you know." He busied himself with the towels after that, clearly eager to drop the subject. Sarah and I weren't satisfied, though. We reported it to guest services later that morning, figuring if there was some safety issue, like a crew member doing unauthorized maintenance. we should say something. The officer on duty, a stern woman named Miss Hargrove, took our statement seriously but assured us there'd been no overboard incidents or exterior activities logged that night. She even had security review the deck cameras, though coverage was spotty back then. By lunchtime, she called us back. Nothing unusual on the footage, but they did note a maintenance team had been pressure washing the hull earlier in the evening, and some water spray might have lingered on the glass, distorting reflections. That afternoon, curious and a bit embarrassed, I borrowed a pair of binoculars from the ship's library and spent some time staring out portholes on our deck and others. Turns out, at night, with the cabin lights off and the ocean's spray on the glass, your own reflection can look eerie, pale, warped, almost like a stranger peering in. Add in the knocking, Ramon later confessed, off the record, that the pipes in older ships like the Noordam sometimes rattled during turns or speed changes, especially in foggy conditions when the engines adjusted. It mimicked knocking perfectly. He'd heard complaints before. Looking back, I think that's what it was. A perfect storm of exhaustion. Sea spray on the porthole creating a distorted mirror effect. And those damn pipes banging away. My brain, half asleep, filled in the rest with some subconscious fear from all the Titanic stories I'd read as a kid. Sarah teases me about it to this day. Remember the time you scared yourself with your own ugly mug? We finished the cruise without further incident, marveling at the glaciers and spotting eagles, and came home with great memories. But I learned my lesson. Sometimes the scariest things at sea are just illusions, and a good night's sleep fixes most mysteries. On July 25th, 2017, the Emerald Princess, a luxurious cruise ship operated by Princess Cruises, was sailing through the pristine waters off the coast of Alaska as part of a week-long family voyage from Seattle. The ship, known for its elegant amenities and scenic itineraries, was carrying over 3,400 passengers, including the Manzanares family from Santa Clara, Utah. Kenneth Manzanares, 39, and his wife Christy, also 39, were high school sweethearts who had been married for nearly 2 decades. They had 3 daughters and were joined by Christy's extended family to celebrate the couple's wedding anniversary and Christy's father's 60th birthday. What was meant to be a joyful escape filled with glacier views, wildlife excursions, and family bonding turned into a nightmare that shocked everyone aboard. The evening began innocently enough. The family had gathered in the couple's cabin on deck 8 for drinks and laughter, reminiscing about old times. However, tensions simmered beneath the surface. Kenneth had been drinking heavily throughout the day, and an argument erupted between him and Christy. According to later court testimony, the dispute escalated when Christy told Kenneth she wanted a divorce and asked him to disembark the ship at the next port in Juneau. Enraged, Kenneth reportedly snapped when Christy laughed at him during the heated exchange. In a fit of uncontrolled violence, he began punching her repeatedly in the head and face, bludgeoning her with his bare fists. The attack was brutal and unrelenting, lasting several minutes. The sounds of the assault, screams, thuds, and cries echoed through the narrow hallways of the ship. Nearby passengers in adjacent cabins reported hearing loud banging and a woman's desperate pleas for help. One witness described it as sounding like someone being murdered. Christy's uncle, who was in a nearby room, rushed over after hearing the commotion. He found the door locked and began pounding on it, yelling for Kenneth to open up. Inside, The scene was horrific. Christy lay motionless on the blood-soaked floor of the cabin, her face severely battered. Kenneth, his hands and clothes drenched in blood, attempted to drag her body onto the balcony, apparently intending to throw it overboard. Two of the couple's daughters, who had been in the cabin, witnessed the final moments of the attack and fled in terror, seeking help from relatives. Ship security was alerted around 9 p.m. and arrived swiftly, forcing their way into the cabin. They found Kenneth standing over Christie's body, his hands raised in surrender. "She wouldn't stop laughing at me," he reportedly told them, repeating the phrase as if in a daze. Medical personnel on board attempted to revive Christie, but she was pronounced dead at the scene from massive head trauma. The crime scene was so gruesome, blood splattered across the walls, furniture, and bedding, that passengers in surrounding cabins were temporarily relocated to other parts of the ship for their safety and comfort. The Emerald Princess, like most large cruise ships, had a small onboard morgue, typically used for natural deaths at sea. Christie's body was carefully stored there to preserve evidence, as the ship was in international waters and under U.S. jurisdiction due to the vessel's flag and the victim's nationality. The atmosphere on the ship shifted dramatically in the hours that followed. Passengers, many of whom were families on vacation, awoke the next morning to whispers and announcements about an incident on board. The captain addressed the guests over the intercom, assuring them that the situation was contained and that there was no ongoing threat. But details were kept minimal to avoid panic. The cruise continued its itinerary, docking in Juneau as scheduled. But the mood was somber. Families huddled together, discussing the rumors in hushed tones, while children played obliviously in the pools and arcades. Some passengers chose to cut their trips short and fly home, shaken by the proximity of such violence, knowing that a brutal killing had occurred just feet away from their own relaxing getaways. The FBI took over the investigation upon the ship's arrival in Alaska, as crimes on U.S.-flagged vessels fall under federal authority. Kenneth was arrested and charged with second-degree murder. Court documents and witness statements painted a picture of a man with no prior criminal history but a hidden struggle with anger and possible undiagnosed brain abnormalities, as argued by his defense team. Experts testified that Kenneth had suffered multiple head injuries in his youth from sports and accidents, which may have contributed to impulse control issues, though this did not excuse the crime. Christie's family described her as a devoted mother, a successful real estate agent, and a vibrant woman who lit up every room she entered. Her death left a profound void, particularly for her daughters, who were thrust into grief and trauma at a young age. The legal process unfolded over the next few years, delayed in part by the COVID-19 pandemic. In February 2020, Kenneth pleaded guilty to second-degree murder, avoiding a trial that would have forced his daughters to relive the horror in court. Prosecutors sought a life sentence, emphasizing the premeditated nature of the attack and the chilling neglect for human life displayed. Defense attorneys advocated for leniency, citing Kenneth's remorse and mental health factors. On June 3, 2021, a federal judge in Anchorage sentenced him to 30 years in prison, followed by 5 years of supervised release, noting the devastating impact on the family but acknowledging mitigating circumstances. Tragically, Kenneth never served much of his sentence. Just over a month later, on July 14, 2021, he was found dead in his cell at the Lemon Creek Correctional Center in Juneau. An autopsy revealed no foul play or COVID-19 involvement. The cause was determined to be a combination of natural health issues, including heart problems, exacerbated by his condition. His death brought a quiet, anticlimactic end to the case, sparing the family further public scrutiny, but denying them the full measure of accountability they might have sought. In the years since, Christie's family has focused on healing and honoring her memory. Her daughters have grown up with the support of relatives, channeling their loss into advocacy for domestic violence awareness and mental health resources. Princess Cruises enhanced its security protocols, including more training for staff on handling domestic disputes at sea. The incident serves as a stark reminder that even in the idyllic setting of a cruise, human frailties can lead to tragedy. But also that justice systems, though imperfect, provide closure in the face of unimaginable loss. The Emerald Princess continues to sail, carrying new passengers toward adventures, while the Manzanares family's story fades into the annals of maritime history, a cautionary tale grounded in reality rather than lingering dread. It was the summer of 1999. Aboard the luxurious Caribbean cruise line ship, the SS Horizon, as it sailed through the warm turquoise waters of the Caribbean Sea. The vessel was a floating paradise, complete with sparkling pools, gourmet dining halls, and endless entertainment for its 1,500 passengers. But for the crew, life was a relentless grind of long hours and high expectations. Among them was Ramon Santos, a 28-year-old cabin steward from the Philippines. Ramon had been with the cruise line for nearly 2 years, sending most of his earnings back home to support his aging parents and younger siblings in Manila. He was known among the staff for his unwavering punctuality, his warm smile that could brighten even the most exhausted shift, and his habit of humming traditional Filipino folk songs while folding linens or polishing brass fixtures. Ramon's duties were straightforward but demanding, ensuring the passenger cabins on decks 4 and 5 were spotless, restocking amenities, and handling any late-night requests. He shared a cramped below-deck cabin with 3 other stewards, a space barely larger than a walk-in closet, filled with the faint hum of the ship's engines and the constant sway of the ocean. On the night of July 15th, the Horizon was midway through its 7-day itinerary, having departed from Miami 3 days earlier and bound for ports in Jamaica and the Cayman Islands. The evening had been lively, with a themed luau party on the main deck that kept passengers dancing until the early hours. Ramon had finished his regular shift around midnight, but volunteered for an extra round of towel deliveries to the service corridors, where spare linens were stored for quick access. Security footage from the ship's rudimentary camera system, grainy black and white feeds that covered only the main hallways and not the narrower service areas, captured Ramon at exactly 3:12 a.m. He appeared calm, carrying a neat stack of white towels under one arm, his uniform crisp as always. He walked down the dimly lit service corridor on deck 4, a narrow passageway lined with locked storage rooms and emergency exits. At the end of the hall, he turned a sharp corner toward a utility stairwell, and that was the last anyone saw of him on tape. He never emerged on the other side, nor did he appear on any of the dozen other cameras scattered throughout the ship. The next morning, July 16th, dawned bright and humid as the Horizon approached the coast of Jamaica. Ramon's shift supervisor, a stern Jamaican woman named Marlene, noticed his absence immediately when he failed to report for the 6 a.m. cleaning rotation. At first, she assumed it was a simple mix-up. Perhaps he'd overslept after the late night. But when a quick check of his cabin revealed his ID badge hanging neatly on a hook, his uniform pressed and ready for the day, and his personal belongings untouched, including a framed photo of his family and a half-finished letter home. Alarm bells rang. Marlene alerted the ship's security team, a group of 5 officers led by Chief Security Officer Harold Jenkins, a retired U.S. Navy man with a no-nonsense demeanor. The search began methodically. Teams of crew members combed the decks, starting from the service corridors and expanding to the engine rooms, kitchens, and even the lifeboat stations. Passengers were politely asked if they'd seen a man matching Ramon's description. About 5'6", dark hair, slight build, always polite. The ship's captain, Elias Thorne, a seasoned mariner in his 50s with a thick Greek accent, made an announcement over the intercom, framing it as a routine check to avoid panicking the guests. But as hours ticked by with no sign of Ramon, the mood shifted from concern to unease. His belongings suggested he hadn't planned to leave. Everything was in order, as if he'd stepped out for a moment and intended to return. What added a layer of confusion were the reports from passengers in the cabins along that same deck 4 hallway. Several families and couples complained at breakfast about disturbances during the night. Soft, insistent knocking at their doors, starting around 3:30 a.m. and continuing sporadically until dawn. One elderly couple from Florida described it as gentle, like someone hesitant to wake us. But when they peered through the peephole or cracked the door, the corridor was empty. A young mother with 2 children said it happened 3 times, each knock followed by a faint rustling sound, but no one in sight. The staff initially dismissed these as pranks or perhaps the ship's creaking in the waves. But the timing aligned too closely with Ramon's last known movements to ignore. By midday, as the ship docked in Montego Bay, Jamaican authorities were involved. Local police boarded the Horizon, reviewing the security footage and interviewing crew members. Ramon's roommates recalled him seeming a bit quieter than usual in recent days, mentioning homesickness and the pressure of back-to-back contracts without a break. One fellow steward, a compatriot from the Philippines named Luis, shared that Ramon had confided in him about financial worries. His sister's medical bills were mounting, and the long separations from home were wearing him down. The police divers searched the waters around the ship's path, but the vast ocean yielded nothing. The investigation dragged on for weeks after the cruise ended. Back in Miami, the FBI got involved due to the international nature of the case, interviewing passengers and analyzing the footage frame by frame. It turned out the corner Ramon turned led to a short, unmonitored section of the corridor with an exterior access door to a maintenance catwalk along the ship's hull. A spot rarely used except for repairs, with no cameras covering it. The door's logs showed it had been opened briefly around 3:15 a.m., though it could have been triggered by wind or malfunction. In the end, after piecing together witness statements, psychological evaluations from crew interviews, and a review of Ramon's personal correspondence, authorities concluded that Ramon had likely taken his own life. Overwhelmed by the isolation and demands of cruise work, a common issue among foreign crew members who often endured 12 to 14-hour days with little support, he had probably stepped out onto the catwalk and jumped into the sea. The stack of towels might have been a final act of duty, or perhaps a way to avoid suspicion as he made his way there. His body was never recovered, lost to the currents, which was unfortunately typical in such overboard cases. The ocean rarely gave back what it claimed. As for the knocking, it was traced to a loose ventilation panel in the hallway ceiling, dislodged by the ship's vibrations during a minor squall that night. Maintenance logs confirmed similar issues in the past, causing intermittent tapping sounds that echoed through the doors. A few passengers might have exaggerated the incidents in the retelling, fueled by the growing whispers of the disappearance. But tests replicated the noise exactly. No ghosts, no foul play. Just the sad reality of a man pushed to his limits on an unforgiving sea. The case was officially closed as a presumed suicide, though Ramon's family back in the Philippines held a memorial service, clinging to the hope that he might have survived somehow. The cruise line implemented new mental health checks for crew and added cameras to blind spots. But for those who sailed with him, Ramon's story became a quiet reminder of the human cost behind the glamour of the high seas. I remember that night like it was yesterday, even though it's been 15 years now. My name's Marco Ruiz, and back in 2010, I was the head pastry chef on the Emerald Horizon, a luxury cruise liner running the inside passage route from Vancouver to Alaska. It was one of those high-end ships. Think crystal chandeliers in the dining rooms, infinity pools on the deck, and passengers paying top dollar for glacier views and king crab dinners. But down in the galley, it was a different world. Hot, chaotic, and running on caffeine and adrenaline. We worked long shifts, especially during the late-night prep for the next day's buffets. The sous chef who went missing was a guy named Thomas Hale. He was in his mid-30s, quiet type, originally from Seattle. Good at his job. Handled the saucier station like a pro, always experimenting with reductions for the salmon dishes we served up there in Alaskan waters. Tomas was on the graveyard shift that night, wrapping up around 2 a.m. after the last of the midnight snacks went out. He took his scheduled break around 1:30, said he was stepping out for a smoke on the crew deck. Nothing unusual about that. We all needed those breathers to shake off the steam and grease. When he didn't come back after 20 minutes, we figured he was just stretching his legs or chatting with someone. But by 3 a.m., with cleanup dragging on, we started looking. I was the one who checked the walk-in freezers first. There were 3 of them in the main galley. Massive things stocked with everything from flash frozen berries for my desserts to whole sides of beef. The one in question was Freezer B, the biggest, used mostly for proteins. It had an internal safety latch, the kind you're supposed to be able to push from inside to get out, no matter what. Just days before, maintenance had replaced it after some complaints about it sticking occasionally. They tested it a dozen times. I saw them do it myself. Worked like a charm. I found Thomas around 3:45 a.m. The door was shut tight, no sign of forced entry or anything. When I yanked it open, those things are heavy, with thick seals to keep the cold in. A blast of freezing air hit me. And there he was, slumped against the back wall amid boxes of halibut fillets. His skin was blue, lips purple, eyes wide open like he'd been staring at something in shock. No blood, no struggle marks that I could see right away. The ship's doctor was called, and security locked down the area. Official word came down quick. Tragic accident. The safety latch had jammed somehow, maybe from the cold or manufacturing defect. And Tomas had panicked, passed out from hypothermia before he could get help. They said he'd probably wandered in there to grab something during his break. The door swung shut behind him, and that was that. But here's where it gets murky, and why the story stuck with so many of us. Another chef on shift that night, a line cook named Lena, swore she heard something around 3:15 a.m. muffled pounding, like fists on metal, and what sounded like a shout or scream coming from inside Freezer B. She was prepping dough nearby and laughed it off at first, thinking it was one of the younger guys pulling a prank. You know how it is in kitchens. Horseplay keeps you sane. She even yelled back, "Cut it out, idiots," and went back to work. Didn't think twice until we found him. Lena was shaken up bad after that. Kept saying if she'd checked sooner, maybe. The crew whispered about it for days. People started avoiding Freezer B alone, especially at night. A few claimed they saw handprints in the condensation on the inside of the door when it was empty, like someone had pressed against it from within, fingers splayed out in desperation. One night, I saw it myself. Foggy outlines that looked eerily human. It sent a chill down my spine, and for a while, I wondered if there was something more to it. Foul play, maybe, or some kind of cover-up by the cruise line to avoid bad press. The ship docked in Juneau 2 days later, and that's when the authorities got involved properly. Alaskan state troopers boarded, along with a forensics team. They interviewed everyone, including me and Lena. Turns out the investigation cleared things up in a way that made sense, even if it was still heartbreaking. Tomas had been dealing with some personal stuff. Divorce papers had come through just before the cruise, and he'd been hitting the bottle harder than usual. Toxicology showed alcohol in his system, enough to impair judgment. The latch hadn't jammed. It was functional, but in his state, he might have fumbled it or passed out before trying properly. Security footage from the galley halls showed him entering the freezer alone, door closing behind him. No one else around. The pounding Lena heard? Likely real, but by the time she noticed, it was too late. Hypothermia sets in fast at those temperatures, especially if you're disoriented. As for the handprints, the forensics guy explained it rationally. Temperature fluctuations in the freezer caused uneven condensation patterns on the door's metal surface. When the humidity inside shifted, say from opening and closing during inventory, they could form shapes that looked like prints. Nothing supernatural, just physics and pareidolia. Our brains seeing patterns where there aren't any. The cruise line quietly upgraded all the latches fleet-wide after that, adding alarms that trigger if the door stays shut too long with someone inside. We all mourned Thomas, held a small service on deck, scattered some ashes into the sea off Glacier Bay. Lena quit not long after, moved back to the mainland. Me? I stayed on ships for a few more years, but I always double-checked those freezer doors. It was a sad accident, plain and simple, born from bad luck and human error.